One day, one of the kids came in and he was just like, "Hey coach, I was watching some of these like Cal Strength videos from back in the day, and there's a guy on there that looks like oddly like you." I was like, "No shit." I was like, "Send me the video. Let me take a look at it." And then like a couple days later, when he came back in, he looked at me. He goes, "You weren't going to say anything?"
That's Tom Sroka, USA weightlifting coach, owner of The Strength Agenda, and multi-sport professional strength athlete. And in this interview, we discuss what it was really like training at Cal Strength.
He was very careful with who he added to the group. Glenn had kind of told me, "Hey, I want you here to push Spencer because I need Spencer to stay competitive." But it was a super competitive environment. The downside to that is, just like with Westside versus the World, when you get a bunch of dudes that are super competitive and like they don't like to lose, like there is going to be some fighting and stuff like that. So, we had guys that we'd get into fist fights. I understood the environment. I was appreciative of the environment. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that ever again.
How he views the relationship between strength and technique.
At the end of the day, weightlifting is a strength sport. And that was one of the things that like I started to learn with Glenn, but there were holes in Glenn's training. You could have the most perfect clean technique, but if you don't have the residual strength to get out of the hole, it's that technique's going to not do anything good. I feel like you need to be pushing both simultaneously, and if you're not, like, you're doing your athletes a huge disservice.
And the lessons he learned from legendary coach Glenn Penrose.
And I think the other thing too that I took away from Glenn that I incorporate with my athletes is I will not ask my athletes to do something I've either not done myself or I'm not going to test out before. And I know a lot of coaches that are going to get butthurt by this, but like...
Welcome back to the Last Set Best Set podcast. I'm Coach Brian. I'm the owner of Big Ben Strength. I've been teaching Olympic lifting for 11 years now.
And I am Coach Calvin, current captain of Lindenwood University's Olympic weightlifting program, as well as a coach through Big Ben Strength.
And today we're joined by weightlifting OG, pro Highland Games athlete, strongman national champion, two-time Team USA Moz wrestler, Grid League strength specialist, USA weightlifting course instructor, owner of the Strength Agenda, and most importantly, dad joke connoisseur, Tom Sroka. Thank you for joining us, Tom.
Thanks for having me. That's a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. It was I was really trying to decide how much of that to include, and I was like, man, all this is important. We got to keep it in. So, most people probably watching this probably know you from like the golden era Cal Strength videos, training with John North, Donnie Shankle, Spencer Mormon.
Not
Kevin
as many as you think. I'm starting to get to that age where there's it's pockets. It's pockets of folks that know me from that. They now know me more from coaching.
Really? Okay. Well, so, a lot of our audience, I did some research like 5 minutes before we got on, is in the like 35 to 45 age group. And so they might actually know you from that time period, which is kind of cool. But, and specifically you were training under Coach Glenn Penley. So like we said, a lot of the younger lifters might not be familiar with that era of weightlifting. Can you explain what it was like training with all these characters that introduced so many people like me into the sport?
The best way to describe it, and I say this with love and affection, no, it's not negative at all, but it was the Wild Wild West. Like a little background on me. I had a track and field background. I was a shot putter in college. I was a 3-time All-American, and I started getting into the Highland Games. And one of the ladies that I was kind of traveling around with and competing and stuff like that was a good friend of mine, Ingrid Markham, and she had competed in Olympic weightlifting. She was a national champion in Olympic weightlifting. She had done one of the Penley certification videos or something along those lines, and so she had a connection with Glenn. And it was just like one day I was just in her, she also had a personal training studio, and I would kind of help her out from time to time when she was traveling because she was on the bobsled circuit at that point. And so I was in her gym messing around one day I think I was doing like one-arm snatches with the barbell. And she came in and she's like, "Can you please stop doing that?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." She's like, "Can I just show you how to do it the right way?" She goes, "You're driving me nuts." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, fine." So she taught me how to snatch. It was ugly, no contact, no nothing like that. But I think I snatched like 100 kilos, like 225, something around there. And she's like, "Do you have any," and she knew I could clean. And I had a good push press and stuff like that. And she's like, do you have any interest in competing in Olympic weightlifting? I'm like, "Absolutely not." And so she got me in touch with Glenn, or she reached out to Glenn. She's like, "Hey, I got this guy. He's a thrower. He's pretty explosive. He understands the basics of the lifts. I think it'd be a great idea." And so like my first experience with Glenn was I got a phone call from him inviting me out. And like, this is the kind of person Glenn was. Like, Glenn was always like 2 steps ahead of everybody. And so Glenn knew what he wanted out of me, but he knew how to get me to to agree. So he messaged me on the premise. He's like, "Hey, I think it'd be great if you came out to Cal Strength for a week. Ingrid says you're a throws coach. I think it'd be really good if I could teach you how to do the Olympic lift so you could take it back to your throwers and teach them how to do the Olympic lifts. It would really help their training." And I was like, "Oh, hell yeah. Like one of the best coaches out there wants to teach me how to do his thing. Absolutely. Like I'm in." So I went out to Cal Strength and, like I'll never forget it. Like he picked me up at the airport. He was an hour late, um, which I come to find out later was his shtick. But like he was an hour late picking me up from the airport. I walk out to his truck, and he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "You're not a 105." And I was just like, "What? No, no, I'm not a 105." Like I was weighing like 260, 270 at that point. And I like there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to cut the 105. So he's like, "You're going to be a super." And I was like, "A super what?" And so like we get in the car, we go to Cal Strength, and we get to Cal Strength, and like I had just gotten off a plane from Chicago. I was tired, I was hungry, and he's like, "All right, let's get your shoes on." And like we did like a 3 hour session of him just showing me like his pen light progressions and things along those lines. I think we just did cleans that first day. And then later that day, he had just moved out to Tracy. So we had like a 45-minute drive. We were just kind of talking about training and what the week was going to look like. And he was telling me about some of the guys and all that stuff. And then I get to the house and I'm in the bathroom, just kind of like, I don't know, brushing my teeth or something. And the door opens up and Donnie Schenkel standing there in a towel. And he just comes up to me. He goes, "Hi, I'm Donnie Schenkel." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "The hell is going on right now?" And that, like, I mean, I should have known then that was how it was going to be. But that was the dichotomy of the entire thing. Like it was just nonsense and chaos the entire time. And like, so I trained with them for that week. Um, I put a ton of kilos on my total, just like training in that week with him, learning how to move better and stuff like that. And then I came back from Chicago and I had a phone call from him and from Glenn, um, inviting me to move out there and train full time. He's like, "I got a job for you. I got all this stuff." The job part was funny though, because he never talked to Dave about any of this. Like Dave didn't know I was coming back. Like Dave was really cool with me when I went out there. Like Dave and I talked. Once Dave found out I was a throws coach, he was like, "Oh man," he goes, "We're trying to start Cal Strength throws. I think you'd be helpful with that. If that's something that you're ever interested in, like we can collaborate, let me know." I was like, "Yeah, cool." Glenn took that conversation as I had a job. And so like Glenn invited me out there. It was like, "You got a job? Like I got all this stuff where you can stay with me until you get your own place and all this stuff." And I was just like, "All right, cool." And so I handed my letter of resignation at the job I had and I moved out there. And I remember walking in and I remember Donnie looking at me and he was like, "Oh fuck, he got you too?" And I was like, "Oh Jesus." And so it was just one of those, like Dave was trying to figure out what I was doing there. For like it was like 2 weeks before Dave finally asked. He's like, "So when are you flying back?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm here like full time." And so it just kind of progressed from there. But it was a really cool training environment. For anybody that's ever seen the West Side versus the World documentary, like that is very like what it was like just with weightlifting. The live streams were interesting to say the least. Like I had never been around an environment like that. The live streams were a big thing, like a big adjustment for me, because everybody's affectionate, affectionately knows John North and his charisma and all that stuff. And like I remember one of the first conversations had with me was like, he's like, "When that little red light pops on Glenn's computer for the live stream, like it's time to turn it up a notch." And I just remember looking at him being like, "What are you talking about?" And then I saw it. Like it was the weirdest thing ever. Definitely not my personality, but like, that little red light would flip on for our afternoon sessions. Cause we train, 9 times a week. We had double sessions Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, Tuesday, Thursdays, and then Saturdays were single sessions. So the Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon sessions were always live stream. And like I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until I started traveling after I had been at Cal Strength for a while. And like you had like Auburn University, their entire strength coach or strength staff would sit on their lunch break and watch us train, because we trained around like 2 p.m. California time. So like we had like Auburn strength staff would sit there and take like a lunch break and watch us train, right? We had John Godina, who is an Olympian in the discus and the shot put. Like, he would like comment on the live stream. We had like World Strongest Man competitors. We had just all sorts of people from different walks of life that you had no clue. And then like we go to things like the Arnold or the Nationals, and you get random people coming up and talking to you like, hey, like that one time when you did that 185 double from the hang, like I didn't think you were going to make that second rep, but man, like you stuck it. And I'm just like, what in the world? Like, why are you paying attention to, like, do you not have something better to do with your time? So it was just this whole world that like I was not exposed to. But like the big thing that I took away from it was the competitive side of it. Like everybody that Glenn, like he was very careful with who he added to the group. Like he was very selective, and he only brought in people that he knew would add. And so like the main reason I was brought in was to push Spencer. Spencer had just set the American record at that time in the juniors, and he was transitioning into the seniors, and Glenn wanted him to continue to push and progress and, you know, do all these things. And he had another super before with Caleb Ward, and for one reason or another, I don't really know what happened with Caleb Ward, but he really didn't continue to progress as a senior. And so like Glenn had kind of told me, he's like, hey, I want you here to push Spencer because I need Spencer to stay competitive. I want him to stay competitive. He can do all these things. And I was like, all right, cool. So like I got paired up with Spencer a lot. We would train a lot. Like there's a real infamous video of him and I going back and forth on the blocks. That one time, like we used to do that stuff all the time. And then at that same time, Donnie was on his Olympic run trying to qualify for the 2012 games, I believe. And then, you know, 16 following that. And so once Donnie realized I was strong overhead, anytime he had a big overhead day, he would grab me and be like, hey, like you're gonna train with me today or whatever. And so like it was just that super competitive environment. Like you just like Rob Blackwell and I, we at the time we were snatching about the same. So if there was like a heavy snatch day, Rob and I would, you know, get like pit against each other. Whether somebody pitted us against each other or we did it ourselves, we decided to lift together. Kevin Cornell was another one. And so like for a while there, Kevin and I had very similar numbers. So I got in our heavy total days, we'd go back and forth and stuff. But it was a super competitive environment. The downside to that is just like with Westside versus the World, when you get a bunch of dudes that are super competitive and like they don't like to lose, like there is going to be some fighting and stuff like that. And so, you know, we had guys that we'd get into fist fights. We had guys that get in each other's face, talk shit, stuff like that. Some guys will take it a little too far. And like to this day, there's a reason I don't talk to one of those individuals. But it's just one of the things where you just like, I understood the environment. I was appreciative of the environment. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that ever again. And probably the closest thing that I have heard, and talking to guys like Leo Totten, Don McCauley, all those guys that were and Travis Mash too, like the two closest environments I've heard that were like that was the old Hoffman barbell days and the West Side days. Like those are the two close, because even when we went to Muscle Driver was a lot more formal because we had a company that was paying us. We had like you know, we had corporate sponsors essentially, so we had to kind of toe a little bit of a line. Hey, we need you to do this ad thing for us. We need you to go do this meet and greet type deal. You had those obligations that you had to do, but it still got heated in there. Like I got into fights with people, and they're like, Travis, you mentioned Travis and the outline you sent me. There was one time Travis and I, you know, dropped a couple F-bombs at each other because we were frustrated. We were both having a bad day and stuff. Like it happens when you put those competitive people in there. But it also, from a personal standpoint, it really ruined me in terms of training. I don't like training with people now. Like I refuse. I have got there's a couple of gyms out here that I've gone in and trained in when they're there or whatever, and for one reason or another, I get annoyed. I'm focused in on what I'm doing. I like, even though I am not what I would consider a competitive athlete anymore, I still take my training very seriously. Like I am in there to work. I am not in there to play on my phone. I am not in there to dance. I am not in there to sing or TikTok or whatever the kids do these days. Like I am there to get my stuff done. And like, if you want to talk in between sets, that's great. But like, once my timer goes off and it's time for me to do my set, like I need you to leave me alone so I can get my set done. So like, it ruined me in terms of training. And like, you can say, I've got friends that like flat out just, I have friends that'll be like, I love you, but like, I'm not training with you. and sort of a deal. So like we'll go like at like national events, we'll go down to the training hall and they'll go one way and I'll go another. They're like, I'm not going to sit around him. And so, like I said, lots of positives, but definitely, I don't know if I'm going to call them necessarily negatives, but there were definitely caveats to those positives and stuff like that in the environment. But so like sum all that back up and wrap that question up, like the best way to describe it was just the wild, wild west. Like you didn't know what was going to happen on any given day. You didn't know the mood somebody was going to be in any given day. You didn't know if somebody was going to be fighting on any particular day. But at the end of the day, like we produced some pretty awesome results, both as a group and individually. And like that experience is something that I don't think can ever be replicated, duplicated, and I'm going to forever be grateful for.
But before we get into that, it's time for the Onyx Lift of the Week. This week's Lift of the Week shout out goes to Ryan Harrigal for this 320-pound clean and jerk at 154-pound body weight in high school. This won him the state championships here, which is pretty impressive. He comes out of Pace High School, and dude, Pace seems like they have heavy hitters. Every single athlete from their team seems like they're putting up some big lifts, but I really want to shout out this lift in particular. This was so impressive because you can tell this was like a tough clean, but nothing too crazy for him. And then he caught the jerk, but it was a little wobbly, but he stuck with it and stayed through it the whole time and recovered. And it was a great lift. So really got to shout this out. I mean, what is happening at high school weightlifting state championships is truly incredible. Like these guys are putting up, over double body weight clean and jerks in high school. Like this is not normal. This is not what used to happen even 5 or 10 years ago in weightlifting. Like this is insane. And I'm just blown away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly think he had even more in that clean. He had a lot more in that clean. I think he could be hitting 340 even in the clean, the way he stands it up. I'm very impressed by Pace High School. They seem to have a pretty good weightlifting system going over there that's just pumping out a lot of really good athletes. A lot of high schools, if you're a high school coach, you are met with one of the best opportunities to develop athletes and set them up for, really a lot of success later on. And I don't know anything about their program internally, but it's clear that there's some good things happening over there. And other high school coaches could probably learn from a thing or two from what they're doing.
For sure. And if you guys want a chance to win the Onyx Lift of the Week and a free pair of weightlifting straps, all you got to do is tag us in your lifts on Instagram at LastSetPod, at Big Ben Strength, at Calvin Lackey 81kg, and at Onyx Straps for your chance to win a free pair of weightlifting straps. All right, back to the episode. So many things to unpack there. I think one that comes to mind real quick is just how ahead of his time Glenn Penley was with doing live streaming. Like live streaming, I mean, we're talking this was what, 2010? I mean,
he was doing it way before then. Like he was doing it like 2008, 2009.
Oh man. When did he
start
doing that?
He moved, he started Wichita Falls weightlifting, I want to say around 2007, 2008. And from there, I believe he moved to Cal Strength around like 2009. And so he was the first one doing the YouTube pages. Like he was doing the live streaming. If Instagram and TikTok would have been a thing, he probably would have been on that. Like he was very much, he knew how to get the word out.
I mean, so we have, I think modern weightlifting has so much to thank Glenn for just with that. Like I would be willing to bet significantly less people would be doing weightlifting without Glenn's input with things like, I mean, live streaming is crazy to be doing in 2009, 2010, and to see it, kind of popping back up a little bit more in popularity now is pretty cool.
But I think like for people of my generation, like that's just such a common thing. Like it's literally like what used to be like, oh, I want to be a YouTuber when I grow up. Like now it's like shifting to now people want to be like live streamers. Like that's like a dream for kids like my age or younger. Like I hear a lot of my teammates talk about that. Like they actually have been streaming every Saturday session on like our TikTok live on our team account or something like that. But it's so oversaturated now. Like I can't imagine like how you would even start a live stream in 2009. Like that was probably like a whole endeavor.
He did a lot of like really just like revolutionary stuff. I'm not gonna lie. Like I kind of like, I don't know if I did a good job of hiding it or not. I started to roll my eyes as soon as you were talking about like your teammates live streaming on their TikTok and stuff like that while they're training. But because like that's something for a coach or a GA or or an assistant to do, that's not really that shouldn't be an athlete thing.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like anytime I've tried to film my own training, like even just setting up the camera, like myself, like my phone camera, like it's a distraction. Like every rep you film is a distraction. And like I totally agree. Like I always try to stay a little bit out of the live stream thing, or just like totally ignore it. Like they can move it around if they want, but yeah, it's like weird because now it's just so common. Like you said, like Glenn Penlay. Another thing about being in my generation is, I didn't really know much about Penlay. I knew the Penlay row. Right. You know what I mean? Like that's like the influence I knew coming into weightlifting. And so to learn so much, like we had Travis Cooper on the podcast, just Brian explaining some of his experiences. I've read Seb's book about Glenn, listened to a lot of podcasts now. And it's like, it's not being like lost upon people, but like you said, like you're starting to notice people like not knowing you from those days and more from your current coaching stuff.
I've literally been asked in the gym if I've ever considered competing in weightlifting. I laugh. Like it does not bother me one bit. Like that kind of stuff. Like I had my time. It's done. It's over with. Like I'd rather be known as a coach. But like, yeah, I thought it was funny. Like I remember it was I had just moved back to Chicago. Yeah, and I was training at Sarah Park. And it was somebody that was in there. They were new to weightlifting, and like I don't fault them whatsoever. But I was just in there lifting and stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh man," they're like, "You move pretty well. Like, have you thought about competing?" And I just played it up. I was like, "No." I was like, it never really crossed my mind. I was like, "Do you know anywhere like I can get in touch? I can get in touch with like a good coach or whatever." And he started like listing coaches and stuff like that. And one of them was a couple of them were my friends, and I thought it was comical. Like it just I laugh about it because there's even like athletes that I coach now. Like I tell the story all the time. I had back in like around the COVID era, I had 3 high school kids that I was training. They were a really tight knit group. They were super awesome to coach. They like pushing each other. And one day, one of the kids came in and he was like, "Hey, coach, I was watching some of these like Cal Strength videos from back in the day, and there's a guy on there that looks like oddly like you." I was like, "No shit." I was like, "Send me the video. Let me take a look at it." And like he never sent the video or whatever. And I'm assuming later on he talked to some of the older athletes that I had in the gym. And then like a couple days later when he came back in, he looked at me, he goes, "You weren't going to say anything?" And I was like, "About what?" He goes, "That it was you in the videos." I just looked at him and I was just like, I said, "Does that affect my ability to coach you? Like, are you going to start listening to me more or less because you know that I was a competitive athlete?" I said, "Or are you going to just take my body of work that I've done with you in terms of your progression and getting you to your goals and take that at face value versus like something I did like, 10 years before I met you?" And he was like, "All right, that's fair."
Yeah.
So like it.
So I think like.
No, I was saying. So it's just at the end, it doesn't bother me that people don't know that or see that or whatever. Like I am A-okay with it.
Yeah. Hobby weightlifters and competitors training might seem the same, but there's one big difference. Competitors need to hit their best lifts on the competition platform. It doesn't matter what you did in training if you can't perform when it counts, and your program should reflect that. Instead of following random programming, maxing out all the time, and hoping for the best on game day, our Competition Strong Team program focuses on long-term progressions that set you up to have your best competition day yet. Each training cycle is carefully designed around the USA Weightlifting National Circuit, so you'll hit your biggest lifts at the Arnold, the American Open Series 2, and of course, the National Championships. If you're ready to take your training to the next level and get platform ready, then click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show.
So I think it's cool, like, and I've heard this sentiment from multiple people talking about Penlay, Cal Strength, and Muscle Driver, that it's just like something that almost you can't recreate.
People have tried.
There's still a lot of lessons. Yeah, and I think there's still kind of a lot of lessons to learn from that time. And specifically one that I'm kind of interested in hearing more about is like how to keep, I know you mentioned some culture problems or, some of the big egos in there kind of clashed. Like, what do you think are some of the mistakes that were made in that time and how can current gyms like avoid the high performance like pitfalls of
I'll be 100% honest with you. I just don't think it's avoidable. Because I've experienced it in my own gym. When I had like a full on team, like at one point, at probably, and I wouldn't say it's my peak coaching because I feel like I'm in my peak of coaching right now. I've got a phenomenal group of masters athletes that I love coaching, and quite frankly, they're some of the best in the world. So it makes my job really easy and a lot of fun. But back in the day when I cared more about like status as a coach, I was taking 6, 7, 8 people to senior nationals, and they were all like top 10 athletes and stuff like that. And that was a lot of fun too. But the egos started to get up. Like I remember I had one conversation with a lifter. They had a conversation with one of Mash's athletes. I love Travis Mash. This is not a knock on him, but they had a conversation. They were in the same session as a lifter of Travis Mash's. Travis Mash was paying his people at the time. And the athlete came up to me and was just like, hey, like, so when can I start getting paid? And I am also very like blunt to a fault. And so this athlete had actually bombed out at like the last 2 meets. And so like I legitimately just looked them dead in the face and I was like, well, let's get a total at a national event. I was like, and then we can discuss you getting paid. I was like, but until you start performing better, I was like, this is not a discussion. And that did not sit well with that person. Like they did not like that. And I would say maybe 2-3 years later, I wasn't coaching that athlete anymore. I had other athletes that, once the one athlete in particular, I'm still friends with him to this day, love him to death, but he always wanted to go heavy. He never wanted to push his strength work, didn't want to do his accessories because it would make him too sore to go heavy and stuff like that. But like he was always like on the cusp. Like he qualified for finals but couldn't quite get to nationals, and then he would be in the gym arguing with me about the method or the practice or like how we were doing things. And I was just like, buddy, like you got to get to nationals first before you start like even remotely having a say in your programming and stuff like that. And like I had another guy who was with me, a muscle driver, Mike Zella, and Mike was I consider Mike more accomplished than I was. Like he won nationals a couple years, he was on, alternates for Pan Am teams and stuff like that. And they would like when I was gone traveling, he would be in charge and they like athletes would like dog him. And I said flat out, I said, until one of you remotely has the resume that Mike and I have had in weightlifting, I was like, I don't want to hear a word out of any of you. So like, there's always just going to be that ego. I don't think it's avoidable. I really don't. I have had to kick athletes out of gyms. It's one of the, like, there were definitely personalities that, and I think Dave Spitz probably did the best job of this after we left, because I had heard that like he had very strict rules in terms of outside sponsorships and all these other things that like athletes were not allowed to do. Like when I talked to Rob and all those guys, like they would tell me about it. And so it was just one of those situations where I wish we would have had some of that in place with some of our individuals that we had at the time, because like at the time, like John North, for instance, John and I do not have a great relationship. I will be the first to, say that. One of the big issues I think that led to his leaving Muscle Driver was him doing his own Attitude Nation thing. Like I wish him nothing but success, and I'm glad he's been able to continue to get the success that he has. But it definitely impacted his training. To the point where like he was doing those seminars and he'd be gone if he did one of those seminars, he'd be gone from like, he'd miss like a Friday, because he'd be traveling on a Friday, he'd have his seminar Saturday, Sunday, would get back either late Sunday or early Monday and like miss Monday training. So that's 2 days of your training that you're missing. And then on top of that, like he was getting paid a stipend and we were all getting paid similar stipends or less stipends, and he was allowed to miss for certain things. And like I remember around one of the times that like he and I had gotten into it about something, I had a friend come down, Matt Vincent, for my birthday, and he was just like, hey, like I don't know what you're doing. He goes, but you're not doing this, like you're coming with me for your birthday. It was like a Thursday, we only had one training session. I talked to Don about it, and Matt and I went down to Columbia. We hung out at Soronex. We went down to Athens, Georgia, hung out with like Reese Hoffa and Adam Nelson, who are 2 Olympians. Like it was a great fucking birthday. And then I got back and I got chewed out, and they were like, we're going to fine you for missing a day of training. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I'm getting fined. I was like, but we have people who are gone for like days on end, and you're not going to do anything to those individuals. And then it was the whole like, well, like they bring this much attention to us, and like they're this popular. Like they didn't say that exactly, but that was like it was the corporate speak for like they're way more popular. They bring more, attention to the brand and stuff like that. You don't. We have to set an example for people that are like lower than you, kind of a deal. It was the whole like be who you can afford to be. And like I think that's unavoidable because at the time I was like, this is not fair, this is not okay, like fuck you guys, like I'm not doing this. And then as a coach I was just like, yep, there are certain athletes that just can do things that others cannot. And there was definitely that buy-in and stuff like that, and that was definitely a maturity thing. But there were also situations where people needed to be reprimanded and dealt with that were not dealt with. And so when you don't deal with the problem, it just becomes a bigger problem. And I feel like that is eventually why it led to certain athletes leaving Muscle Driver or Cal Strength or whatever the situation is and stuff like that, is because small issues that could have been dealt with were not, and they just continued to progress into bigger and bigger things until it became just this monumental thing that you just could not handle anymore, and the only like viable solution was to part ways.
That's always such a tough situation, and it's something that I've owned a gym, I've talked to other gym owners, and been a member of certain gyms all over the place, and time and time again, that is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is not addressing the little things before they become bigger things. It is and I had the first gym owner that I had, he was really good at that. That man would address a small issue before you even realize that it was a problem, and I can't imagine the amount of problems that he saved.
And that was I think that's a great point, because like I joke around in terms of my gym ownership. I had 3 gyms that I owned throughout the time that I had one. The very first one, it was a partnership. So like I felt pigeonholed because I couldn't do anything without consulting my partner, and we didn't always agree on stuff. So you had to come up with like a compromised solution all the time. The second time, I just wanted people to like me. Like I let a lot of stuff slide in the first like gym when I separated from the second gym when I separated from the first one. And then when I got into the third space, I was like, nope, absolutely not. You're out of here. Like you will not do that again. Like I will kick you out of here. Like I'm not going to say I was a tyrant, but I was very stern to the fact that I would like hand drop-ins their money back. Like I would literally like they would start doing something. There was an ATM at the Mexican restaurant that we shared a parking lot with. I would go over to the ATM, get money out of the ATM, walk back in, hand them their money. I'm like, you are done for the day. Because I had kids in the gym, and I remember the situation very clear. I had kids in the gym that would train. And I had this guy, he was a strong man. He wanted to use our stones and stuff like that. And he missed a stone. And so like, I don't know if you ever dealt with Atlas stones or whatever, but there's tacky and it gets everywhere. I had a very clear designated area where I was like, do not walk past this spot with tacky. He missed a load, didn't stop the stone. The stone rolls out onto the turf, covered in tacky. Meanwhile, he's standing on the platform screaming obscenities at the top of his lungs because he's upset that he missed a lift. And the stone is rolling towards where a bunch of kids are training. And like I watched this whole thing take place, and that stone sat there for about 5 minutes before he came over to get it, and then slowly rolled it. So there's like a snail trail of tacky on the turf now that I got to try to figure out how to get up. And like as soon as I saw him moving the stone back, I went to the restaurant, came back around, and I handed him his money. I handed him his drop-in fee. It was like $20. I was like, you're done. I was like, go home. I'm not dealing with this. And he's like, what did I do? I was like, I had recorded the whole tirade. And I showed him, I was like, this. He's like, I can't swear. I was like, no. I was like, because I fucking swear all the time. I was like, you can't scream obscenities at the top of your lungs when I got kids in here training and damage my equipment and leave the stone sitting in the middle of a turf field. I was like, you are gone. So like the last gym I had, I was very like, I had lifters who like, if they didn't follow a program, I'd send them, like if I saw them not following the program, I would like step on the bar. I was like, you have 2 choices, do it right or go home. Like I was very like no chill by the time I got to like the third space, because I think it was the third space was mine. Like it was all of my money. Like I had invested a ton of time into this space to get it exactly how I wanted it. And I was like, nobody is going to mess this up for me. So I definitely think it comes with a maturity thing as well.
So I want to ask, Calvin just opened up a gym.
Yeah.
You helped me a ton with avoiding making a really huge mistake in this like Facebook group in 2019 for coaches and club owners. Where you helped me make sure not to sign a lease on a place that would have just been absolutely way too huge for me, and then unknowingly would have walked right into that, had that lease through COVID, which would have been awful. Saved me. I mean, you probably saved me. I would be willing to bet close to like over 100
well, I'm
grand.
glad. I mean,
one,
you're
thank
welcome.
you for that. And with Calvin opening up his gym like in the last week or two, what advice do you have for maybe new coaches who are thinking about getting into
the biggest thing? So like that piece of advice I gave you, I actually got from a seminar I attended with Jason Khalipa. So he was the one that actually told me that, and that was the model I followed when I went to my gyms. And his rule of thumb essentially was, and I tell anybody that is opening a gym this: start smaller than you think in everything, equipment, space, what you're offering. Like everything, start smaller than you think or want. Like if you want to have like a full-on weightlifting program, but you also want to have group classes and you want to have sports performance and you want to have all this stuff, offer one of those things and offer the thing that is going to financially keep you afloat while you start to build the others. Space wise, get a small space. Sign a 1-year lease. Sign a 1-year lease on a small space. And if you only have 3 platforms in that space for that year, and it gets to the point by the end of that year where you are busting at the seams, great. When you sign that next lease, sign a 2 to 3 year lease with a little bit of a bigger space. Like he the big thing he had showed us and taught us was like do things in steps. Like have a plan, have it. And like I have the notebooks stashed away in my office. I have a notebook. I wrote a 5 and a 10-year plan. And but I was kind of in like no man's land when I got to that third gym space, because technically speaking, that was year 7 of my 10-year plan. And I had accomplished the plan. And I was like, well, what the hell do I do now? So like, I kind of felt like I was just like floating and like floundering for a little bit there, because I was like, because for so long I was like, this is part of the plan. This is part of the plan. This is part of the plan. And then you accomplish that plan. So it's probably a 2-part piece of advice: write a 5-year, write a 10-year plan out and stick to it and be realistic. Don't pie in the sky stuff. Like talk to other people. When I was opening my gym, I went to Travis Mash and hung out on his farm with him for a little bit. I went down to Don McCauley's and I talked to him for a little bit about his gym. A couple of CrossFits that I was coaching at the time that I respected: Corey Wharf at CrossFit Weddington in Weddington, North Carolina, Steve Pinkerton, who owns Vitality Fitness in Concord. Like those were the guys that I sat down with and I was like, what were the things you wish you knew? And so out of those conversations and then my own goals and aspirations, I wrote a 5 and a 10-year plan in terms of what I wanted to accomplish. And then I went to that seminar thing. It was like a business owner's thing that he just happened to be speaking at. And then that second piece of it is to start smaller than you think and grow from there. Because it's always easier to continue to add on, but it's not as easy to pull back if you think you're doing too much and stuff like that. And like I have made all of those mistakes. So if I ever do get back into the gym owner business, like I am like raring to go with all my mistakes that I made in order to not do them again.
Yeah, I mean that's such a great piece of advice in both like the equipment space and also in the actual lease, right? Like, you can't drop your lease down an extra 400 square feet if you can't afford it. You can't, like, you can buy too much equipment and then try and get rid of equipment that you're not using, but you're going to make pennies on the dollar, right? It's so much easier to get a smaller lease and to upgrade a little bit at a time, and to get just enough equipment and to buy one barbell or one set of plates at a time than to try and fork out the cash for all of it, especially
and like Calvin, if you're going to run competitions and stuff like that, this is what we did the first year at the first space that I had when it was a CrossFit. So what we would do is we would run 2 meets a year, and what we would do is we would take half of like the money we made off of the meet, and we would buy like a barbell and a competition set. And so after like, I think it was like after 2 years, like we had 4 full, like we started out with 2 competition sets, like when we opened the facility, but by the time the meets were over, or by the time that like that time was over and we had moved on, the weightlifting club had 6 competition sets with good bars to go alongside of them. And then I continued that trend. Like every meet that I ran, I took a portion of that money, a certain percentage, whether it was like 25%, 30%, whatever it was, and it would go into buying some piece of equipment. Like I would use like my earnings from like strongman and Highland games to like, I bought, like I remember one year I won like $1,200 at a strongman competition, or at a Highland games. I bought a deadlift bar for the gym because we didn't have one. You know what I'm saying? Like find creative ways to reinvest in the gym so you're not like dipping into your personal money or the business money. You know what I'm saying? Like run an event and just earmark a percentage of what you make off of that meet to getting that nicer equipment and stuff like that. And then like I said, by like you do that for like 3, 4, 5 years, like you're going to have a pretty nice setup of equipment that you've grown into and that your athletes will see and appreciate that you're constantly investing and you're not having to break the bank to do so.
Yeah, I love that kind of the rule that, I mean, we've been renting space for about 1.5 years now, and the rule we've been following is just saving 30% of everything we make for business reinvestment. And I don't know where, I think that was my co-owner just decided to do that, and I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And so that's allowed us to expand when we didn't think we would ever, like you said, we had maybe like a 3-year plan in mind, and that got thrown out of the window like a year in because we got an opportunity to expand, and it was a really, really good deal, and we had the cash on hand to buy equipment and make that investment.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of the rule we've been following. As far as like expansion goes, when do you know it's time? Like you're saying, like bursting at the seams.
So for me,
like, what does that look like?
My rule of thumb was I always measured Saturdays. Saturdays were always our busiest day in the gym. And on any given Saturday, if it was one of those, when I knew it was time for us to move from the space that we were at, is when it got to the point where like once the training got going on Saturdays, I could not move. Like I literally found like a little perch and I had to stay there because if I moved, I was either going to be in somebody's way or I was getting hit with a barbell or a piece of equipment and stuff like that. Like that gym space that we had, I think was in total like 2,500 square feet, with 15 of it being the gym space. And we had rows of platforms. So I think we had 6 rows of platforms. Then we had a little rubber area where our power lifters and our strongmen were training. We had a squat cage over there. Then we had a bay door that went out in the parking lot, and guys would take like the farmer's handles and stuff out there and do stuff. And then we had this little like 10-foot wide by like 20-foot long turf strip that people could do sleds. We had pull-up bars and all that stuff. And it was just one of those situations where like when every piece of available space was used to the point that your anxiety was starting to increase because you're like, somebody is going to get hurt. That's when I was just like, that started, and when it happens on a consistent basis, here and there is not a good indicator, but like it was getting to the point where like every Saturday I dreaded going in because I'm like, man, like how am I going to make this work? So-and-so is coming in today. I know I'm going to need the space to do this, but I also know all these people are going to be in. And that was starting to happen. So at that space, we had signed a 3-year lease, and that was starting to happen towards the end of year 2 going into year 3. So then when the last year of the lease started, that's when I started actively looking for another space and kind of planning it out and trying to plan that transition and stuff, because it was just, because that space was pressuring me to take over other units. And I just knew like for where the gym was going, what we were doing, because the problem with that space is we really couldn't run events. We could, but it just wasn't very feasible. And so we needed a bigger space to run events and stuff. So like I said, but on top of the fact that we had the need and the request for us to put on more weightlifting meets and things like that, plus like Saturdays. And that was the other thing too, is like once the Saturdays started getting packed, other days, like Mondays would always be another chaotic day. Wednesdays would always be another chaotic day. Thursdays were usually kind of low key. Fridays were kind of hit and miss. But when a majority of the days of the week that you're in there training are starting to get that chaoticness where you're like, this is kind of, flirting with the line here, and it's happening on a consistent basis. That was my indication that I'm like, yeah, I need a bigger space.
Okay, I got like two things to follow on that, and I want to know what the good like coach to athlete ratio.
I am the worst
in
person
the gym
to ask with that, but I will answer it for you. I honestly, I am very picky about my coaches. Like I want it done my way and my way alone. Mm-hmm. So like I was very reluctant for the longest time to take on interns. And then I eventually did and stuff like that. I didn't have assistant coaches for the longest time. Like I had one assistant coach at the one space. And that was Mike. And then when we moved into the last space, I then brought on, I had two other, they're athletes of mine, I brought on to run our sports performance program and stuff like that. So it's just one of those situations, like it took me a very long period of time, but I would say flat out, like a good recommendation is like no more than 10 athletes at a time. Like you need at least like in a gym setting like that. You need, because the problem I started to run into is, especially once we moved into the newer space, or the last space, we had a lot of intros, and I did all the intros. I never handed off the intros. I wanted to be the first point of contact for anybody that came into the gym that was looking to join us and do our thing. And so I would do all the intros, but then you'd have, 6, 7, 8, 9 people in their training that were like looking for coaching and wanting your advice and wanting your help and your assistance and things like that. So it made it difficult to give that individual person the time that you needed for the intro, plus have them. So I had other coaches that started to come on. So like I said, I think a good, like in an open gym setting like that, I think a 1-to-10 ratio is good. Now, if you have like more of an open gym format where people are just doing random programs and stuff like that, obviously that can increase. But that was, again, something that I wasn't a fan of. Like everybody that trained in my gym was following one of my programs. So like if they're on your programs, if you're the one coaching them and training them, I think a 1-to-10 ratio is acceptable.
Yeah, that's good, and definitely something I'm going to consider as we're kind of like usually in like the 5 to 8 range in a session right now, and that's pretty manageable. But like, say for instance, this Saturday, I think we had 6 people. Yesterday we had 6 people, and 2 of them were brand new that we had never had eyes on before. One of them had never really tried, first time doing snatch ever, and another one was a CrossFitter who we had no clue how they moved at all. And so then we're trying to balance, like, okay, here's our long-term members that are on programs. Here's a guy who's been in for a few weeks at least, like trying to get everybody coaching. And I want to know too, like, how do you balance, and what was your focus in your gym on like beginners or maybe like people that are less into the sport versus the high level weightlifting?
I wanted them all. It was like, so at the time that I had my gym, there wasn't a lot like my facility. So like, and you had mentioned all like my credentials and stuff like that. So between like the Moss Wrestling, the Highland Games, the Strongman, the powerlifting, all of that stuff on top of the Olympic weightlifting, I had people searching me out for all those things. So it was one of those, like, I had a wide variety of talent and sports being trained at any given time, and I wanted it all. I wanted them all interacting. Nobody was better than the other. I had newbies standing right next to podium finishers at nationals and stuff like that. There were no egos, and I remember I did kick an individual out of the gym one time for the day. It was just for the day because they were being a diva about the particular barbell. They were upset that somebody had used their barbell. They're like, they shouldn't be on, like. And it was one of those situations where I had told the lifter, I was like, if you want, like, because they're like, can I just bring my bar in? I was like, yes. I was like, but if you don't want people lifting on it, you have to label it. And guys would do that. I had guys that would label their own particular bars and stuff like that. And like if a newbie grabbed it, I was like, hey, you can't touch that bar. Grab any other bar you want, but not that one. And so it's just like, as long as there's ground rules and stuff like that, it was okay. But then like I would get people that would be like, I had one, he was a football player, which notoriously from a historical standpoint were some of my biggest pains in the asses. But I had this football player that like he got pissed because a newer lifter who he considered less than was staring at him while he was lifting. And like he threw a freaking temper tantrum, and I just said flat out, I was like, if that's what you're gonna blame for having a bad day, I was like, you got a long way to go mentally before you step up foot on the platform. I was like, because I have news for you. I was like, you're gonna extrapolate that out by about 100, and that's how many people are gonna be staring at you while you're taking your lift. So if you can't handle one person staring at you, and it's gonna cause you to miss a lift, like you're gonna have a rough time in the sport. And like he came back the next day, he apologized, and we were fine. But like, yeah, it's just I didn't differentiate between that. Like I had people who came into the gym that were just like, I have zero desire to compete. Cool. Some of those athletes were the most fun to work with because it was just essentially we would just create a goal, you know. That one guy I'm thinking of in particular, when he first came to me, he's like, I want to back squat 400 pounds. So all our focus was on back squat. Like he did the snatches, he did cleans, but the main goal was to back squat 400 pounds. And once he did that, he's like, I want to snatch 90 kilos. So then our focus was doing that. Like he was one of my funnest athletes to coach because it was just he was just so dedicated, and he wanted to get that goal accomplished. But he never stepped foot on a platform. I tried getting him a couple times. I'm like, I just want to let you know, man, like you're getting up there in master's age, like you be competitive in this weight class or whatever. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, all right, cool. I had a handful of people that just didn't want to compete, and that was fine. I had other people who would come in, they just wanted to spend time with their spouse. They're like, I don't want to do Olympic weightlifting. Do you have like a basic like squat press pull program that I could follow so that like I can look good, naked and just get a good like workout in without like having to run miles? I was like, sure do. And so like they would just come in when their husband or their wife came in. They would do their thing in the gym. Like there was plenty of space for them to train and stuff. But like we would do like team outings. We would have events at the gym and stuff like that. And everybody knew each other. Like one of my strongmen, I remember when he wanted to give Olympic weightlifting a try, like all the guys like were dying, like they absolutely loved it. And so he did a local meet, and I just remember or he did a local meet in the gym, and I just remember like all the dudes showed up, like they were like either had already competed or they were competing later, but like all the guys on the weightlifting team showed up to cheer for him. And it was one of the coolest but also one of the funniest things, and it made the guy uncomfortable, which I also thought was great. But it was just like we had that kind of camaraderie. Like it did not matter, like people had nicknames for each other and all sorts of stuff, but like it didn't matter what your ability level was, what your desires were, what your goals were, things along those lines. Like I wanted everybody training together because the space I created was for everybody to be in. Like there was no, because I know some gyms have like my elite athletes are training at this time, my middle of the road are training at this time, my beginners at this time. I didn't have any of that. The gym was open from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Come in whenever you want, get your training done, and then go on home for the day. And that was Monday through Friday. The gym was open 3 to 8 p.m. Saturdays, it was open 9 to noon. Like, and it was just come in, get your lifting done, whatever your program says, whatever you've got going on, I will be there. I will be coaching you, and like, let's do this thing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And that's kind of how we're approaching it too. Like we want everybody, but obviously those beginners need essentially near one-on-one attention in that session.
So the thing that helped with that too is once you just establish that culture, I was very fortunate. I had about like, man, you guys are making me reminisce about this real hard now. I had about 6 or 7 athletes that I was coaching, and they were like my higher end athletes, or they had been people like one of them was a girl who I coached her in college. Like I threw with her brother in college. And then when I started coaching in college, she was one of my first group of athletes. She was an all-American discus thrower. When I opened a gym, she was the first person to sign up. So I had coached her through. She qualified for finals as a weightlifter. Didn't really like that. Decided to do powerlifting. She won a nationals in powerlifting, but she thought powerlifting was boring. So she started doing strong woman, started competing in strong woman, winning shows and stuff like that. So she had that experience as well. But like I had like her, and then I had like her eventual husband, and then like a couple other athletes that like if I wasn't around, or if I wasn't like if I was working with somebody else, they would go up to the person and be like, hey, do you have a question? Like, can I help you, kind of a deal? And like that you started having that like trickle down effect of like they bought it, and they would all say, they're like, this is our gym. Like, I'm proud of this. Like, I'm proud of what we've got going on here. Like, I don't want anybody thinking negatively of us. So if I can help in any sort of way, I will. And it just created from the top down that like that safe environment for anybody to come in and feel welcome. And on the flip side, like if you were an asshole, you did like 90% of the time, like if we had people being jerks in the gym, it got to me way after the fact. Like they would take care of that problem before it got to me, or they would just like warn them, be like, hey, we're just letting you know right now, like Tom's not going to put up with that. So like if you like, it'd be a day that like I was either running late or I went to go run an errand or something like that, or I had a doctor's appointment. And so the gym was open and they were kind of watching things while I was, doing what I was doing. But like if something was happening while I wasn't there, they'd be like, hey, Tom's not going to put up with that. So they're like, if you don't knock it off, like he's going to deal with it and you're not going to like what he's doing. So like, we're just giving you a heads up now. So like that culture that you created there kind of from the top down, it just trickles down and it just, everybody's welcome. Everybody, got their goals accomplished and you were cheering people on, whether they were snatching 40 kilos or they were snatching 140 kilos. You had that same kind of energy when those athletes were going heavy and stuff like that. And that was probably the thing I was the most proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we can, let's bring it back and talk a little bit more about some training stuff. So, so we had this conversation recently in the DMs about the relationship between technique and strength. And you said something I wish more people kind of talked about. And you said, when it comes to strength versus technique, the biggest disservice a coach can do is emphasize one over the other. How do you view the relationship between strength and technique?
At the end of the day, weightlifting is a strength sport. I know that ruffles a lot of feathers and stuff like that. And that was one of the things that like I started to learn with Glenn, but there was even, in my opinion, there were holes in Glenn's training. Like one of the biggest disservices I think Glenn did as a coach, and it's weird, and now we'll just go with it. The book that Seb put out, there's a lot of things in that book that I don't ever recall Glenn doing. So not to say that Glenn never did them, but I wonder, I have thoughts in terms of how much of that stuff was things that were mentioned in conversations. Because Glenn and I, like we would have like a 45-minute drive back and forth from Tracy to Cal Strength. And we would talk about all sorts of training methodologies. And he would tell me about a lot of his ideas and things like that. And some of those ideas were things like the isometric pulls, right? Like those were things that we would talk about all the time. But we never did those. Like I was with the man from 2012, 2016. I never did an isometric pull with him. We had the ability to do so. It just never happened. So I wonder how much of that stuff, because especially because I saw that they were enlisted in some of the programs there. I wonder how much of that was either stuff that he maybe incorporated later on in his later years before he passed, or they were things that Seb added because Seb, like I think there's some things that Seb definitely embellished on a lot of like that Penlay method, because I have the book. It's a great book. But there are certain things that are in there that like I messaged him directly and I was just like, hey, when did you guys incorporate this? Like, where was this incorporated? Like what part of the training phase and stuff like that? Because I was like, because the other thing too is I kept every workout that I ever did sitting in my office. I've got 5 notebooks that have every workout I have ever done with Glenn. Like I cataloged everything and took records of everything because I wanted to learn. And I was always trying to understand the method of the madness. And there were just things that were in that Penlay method book that I just kind of did the whole dog like tilting head thing. I was just like, I don't remember that ever being a thing. And then like I messaged Travis because Travis and him had a lot of those conversations later on after I left Muscle Driver. And so like I would message Travis and I'm like, hey, did you ever talk about any of this? And Travis would kind of be like, yeah, like we talked about it, but we tried to implement it, but it didn't really work and all this stuff. So there's some things in terms of that. But one of the things that Glenn, I don't think did enough of was heavy pull work. We did not do a lot of heavy pulls. We would do pulls for like 3 weeks, and then we would not do pulls like the rest of a training block leading up to a competition. And I hated that. So that was something that I switched or whatever. But in my experience, the stronger athlete is always going to be the better athlete. When I get asked to take like 2 lifters, I have this lifter A over here who has phenomenal technique. They hit every position. Their consistency is off the charts, but they are essentially weaker than water. And then I have athlete B who sometimes forgets to squat, right? Or they forget to make body contact and stuff like that. But they are like just an absolute animal of a human being in terms of strength. Like which one am I going to take? I'm going to take athlete B every time because I can teach technique. and I can get you. It's kind of like cardio for me. Like there's a lot of research that like it doesn't take you very long to develop a cardiovascular base. Same thing with technique. You can emphasize some technique work whilst continuing to nurture that strength work, and that athlete will get pretty proficient in the lifts. On the other side, strength takes a lot of time. It takes so much time to get yourself from a 400-pound to a 500-pound back squat. You could have the most perfect clean technique, but if you don't have the residual strength to get out of the hole, it's that technique's going to not do anything good. So when I see or hear coaches talking about like snatch camp or like we're going to do a technique block, I literally will look at them and be like, what does that mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, you should be focusing on technique all the time. And so when I'm training my athletes, I push technical proficiency and strength at the same time. And it's going to be this constant tug of war. Like your strength reserves are going to pop up, and then your technique has to come and match those, strength reserves. And then the strength reserves are going to go up again. Then the technique has to match it. Like it's this constant struggle. And as a coach, you're just doing a huge disservice emphasizing one or another. Now, I will say we do specific strength work with our lifters, but it is usually after a big competition prep, and I'm just giving their body a little bit of rest. But it's nothing more than about like a 4 to 6 week block of just like some squats or some squat press pull work or whatever. But like there's still a little bit of Olympic lifts sprinkled in there to keep them sharp, but it's more to give their central nervous system a rest from the constant like going heavy off the floor and all that stuff versus like completely abandoning technique and just focusing on strength. But yeah, for coaches, I feel like you need to be pushing both simultaneously. And if you're not, like you're doing your athletes a huge disservice.
Tired of programming that doesn't work? Inconsistent technique, missing lifts, or going months without PRs is all signs that your program isn't working. If this is you, I'd like you to consider joining the OlyStrong team, my online weightlifting program available in 3, 4, and 5 days a week for weightlifters looking to dial in their technique, get strong, and most importantly, set PRs. Each week is structured to support the things all weightlifters need. Enough practice in the snatch and clean and jerk to dial in your technique, a consistent strength program to build big squats, pulls, and presses, and accessory work carefully chosen to build muscle that supports your Olympic lifts. The program uses logical progressions that focus on building momentum each week instead of just maxing out every week, or worse, only lifting light to work on your technique. If this sounds like something you need, then scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show. Yeah, I think that whenever somebody brings up the strength versus technique debate, it's always like, why is this a versus? Like they feed into each other so much.
Like that, man.
Good. Exactly. Like if you have good technique, you're probably strong enough to be able to maintain that technique. And then if you have no strength, but you have perfect technique, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you're not lifting as much. And so when somebody says like they're gonna bias or they're going to do like, emphasize one or the other, I'm always curious to know what that actually means to the person, because I think that that's where the discrepancy lies, right? Like for some coaches, they'll say we're going to do a technique block, and that means that they, to them, they're not going to do any squats or pulls or anything like that, and all they're going to do is just a lot of light Olympic lifts. And then another coach will say we're doing a technique block, and that just means that we're doing maybe some extra variation at certain positions that are a little bit weaker for you than others. But other than that, the training stays the same, and so I think the battle gets lost in knowing what that actually means to the coach. So I'm always curious, and I love to ask coaches that kind of stuff. I'm curious to know, not curious to know. Thinking back on some of the Penley book stuff. I know some of that stuff was stuff that he
100%, and I'm always willing to admit that. Like I said, I was with the band for 4 years. That is it. We did not have a great relationship for about 2 years after I left, and then like it was I had a falling out with Muscle Driver, and that's why I left. And it was just one of those situations where I just wasn't willing to play their games anymore. And I just got fed up with it. And so unfortunately, like my relationships with Glenn and Don suffered, but we were on the path towards kind of like making amends and things like that. And then he passed. So it's one of those, like, it's definitely probably one of the biggest regrets I have is the fact that I lost like those 2 to 3 years with both of them, because they both died like right around the same time. And they were just such huge influences in my life in terms of coaching and weightlifting as a whole and things like that. Like I would not have any of the things that I have now if it was not for those two individuals, Glenn in particular. So like that is definitely a big regret of mine. But it was definitely one of those situations where like Glenn and I started reconnecting when he launched Penlay Wad, because I had people that would screenshot me. Like he would write, I don't know how often it would happen, but if he ever wrote kettlebell swings, there was always a blurb that he put in there, and he was just like, he goes, I don't want to see you playing around with anything less than 50 pounds. Tom Sroka used to do sets of 10 with a 200-pound kettlebell. And so like, and then I had people that would like screenshot it to me, and I'm like, I cannot believe he remembered that whole scenario in and of itself, let alone like write it every time he wrote kettlebell swings in this workout manual that he was putting out. So, but yeah, like there are definitely things that I do know that he definitely softened his stance on CrossFit being one of them. Like he, I like the fact that he called it Penlay Wad, like we were blown away. So those of us who knew him, because I remember somebody brought that up to him a while back when we were at like Cal Strength or Muscle Driver. And he's like, "It's the stupidest thing ever. I'm never doing that." And then here it is, this platform that he was making a ton of money off of because it was called Penlay Wad. Like, so yeah, I definitely know like he evolved as a coach and had a lot of things that he added on. It's just I guess my bigger point was the timing of when Seb would say that Glenn incorporated these things. I was just like, that's where I would have issues with some of the stuff.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the pulls, especially in deadlifts, were one thing that I know he changed later on. Because so how I got to know Glenn was he started doing the training camps around 2016 or so, and so I got to go out into the winter camp in 2016 and in 2017, and then in the in between I did the online stuff with him. And that was the big change, even from the first camp to the second camp, was he really hammered on pulls and deadlifts, and he thought that was a huge factor. And that was around the same time that he was like really getting into West Side stuff too.
I was going to say like you have Travis Cooper to thank for a lot of that, because I remember when Travis came to Muscle Driver, Travis was a big LSUS fan, where like they would do sets of 10s on the pulls and stuff like that, or sets of 10 deadlifts and things like that. And he got Glenn to kind of buy into that again, which had always interested me that Glenn was very anti-pulls because he was a power lifter. Like people don't know, like he competed at IPF Worlds a couple times in powerlifting, and then he got taught by the guys who created the conjugate system. Like those are the dudes that taught Glenn how to weightlift. Like it just blew my mind. And like he and Louis were so close too. Like that was another one of my regrets, is like I never got to meet Louis. I only knew Louis through Glenn, and like through obviously the same ways everybody else did and stuff like that. But Glenn and Louis were like thick as thieves. Like I remember being at the house in California, and like they'd be on the phone, like it was like two old men on the phone. Like I'm sure they both had their phones on speaker, like yelling at the top of their lungs. But like they'd have like a 4.5 hour conversation about training. Or it was something like, I remember one time Louis called because he had a thought about snatch grip deadlifts and he wanted to talk to Glenn about it. These guys talked for 4.5 hours about snatch grip deadlifts and how it could benefit both powerlifters and weightlifters. Like it was crazy the kinds of conversations that those dudes would have. And like, so it always interested me. And I would just ask them, I'm like, you're a powerlifter. Why are you so anti-pulls? And he was just like, don't worry about it. Just do what I tell you. I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah, that was one thing that I never really understood about it, is like he really didn't seem all that interested in pulls, and then like they would show up on like a taper program, and I'm like, we haven't done pulls at all like this whole time, and then it would be on the taper, and you're like, what is going on? And I never understood that, but then later on he really changed his stance on it. He like even in some of the old like Weightlifting House podcasts, he would talk about why he changed his stance on deadlifts, and he's like, he broke it down. He was like, if it's slow off the floor and you're weak off the floor, maybe you should deadlift. So
that was one of the things I was just like, thanks, Glenn. Cause like, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to sit here and say that like, it would have helped me a ton, but like, I definitely think it would have sped up my learning curve on things like the snatch, because like if you ever watch any of my old videos, I was a terrible snatcher. Like comparatively speaking, I clean and jerk all day long. Snatching was my nemesis, and it was just because snatching, like, and I was able to analyze this after the fact. I was much better snatching from like blocks or from the hang, but like snatching was uncomfortable off the floor for me. And I like if I could go back and coach myself, like I'm like, man, I wonder how much better off I would have been had I done more heavy pulls, because some of my best snatching done off the floor would be right after we had done some heavy pulls or had like heavy pulls in our training for a few weeks leading up to it. And so like it was just one of those. I was like, well, thanks, Glenn. We realized that after the fact. But it's just one of those things like, yeah, like I'm glad he came around to it, and I agree wholeheartedly, because that's how I train my lifters now.
That was one change that I noticed in the 2 to 3 years that I worked with him. And then another change that I noticed was starting to favor accessory work and bodybuilding work a little bit more often. He had this kind of joke around that time of like, if a weightlifter got tried for being a weightlifter, the case would be thrown out for lack of evidence. And so he always said that we had to build some evidence. But then, the application of it, I just thought was a little underdone. It would just be like, oh, let's throw a couple extra sets of pull-ups on the week, and not like real emphasis on that bodybuilding. But bigger picture than that is like, it was cool to see, even up until he passed, he was constantly working on 100%. Refining his approach and changing his approach and learning, and he was open to learning and changing things. I'm curious to know two things. What changed, like how did his approach to programming change while you were with him? What were some of the things that you remember? And then the second thing is, how has your approach to training changed?
The big thing that I think changed, and it was just because he got tired of people whining, is he would actually map out training blocks. When I first got there, you did not know what you were doing that week. It would be literally like, as you were warming up, he would tell you what you were working on that day. And like he would have it all up here. And like, I never doubted him. Like I would do it. But that's why I started right. That was the big reason why I started to write things down, because I wanted to see the pattern. And then by the time we got to Muscle Driver, even the owner at the time, Brad Hess, was just like, you can't keep doing this. Like you need, like, if we're going to start bringing people out here and paying them, like there needs to be more structure. And so he would, the first time he did this, I died laughing. He wrote on like a yellow lined piece of paper, like, week 1, we're doing these percentages. Week 2, we're doing these percentages. Week 3, we're doing these percentages. And he was like, and this is the variation that we're going to emphasize. And then he would write it out, and it was just like the most like minimal piece of information. But we were happier than clams because we knew what we were doing or what was expected, what was the goal. Because that was the thing, is like, he wouldn't tell us like what the end goal was. He would just say like, hey, I want you doing behind the neck push press. I want you to build to a heavy set of 5 kind of a deal. Like that's your main whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I'm like failing at whatever weight I'm failing. And he's like, well, Tom, he goes like, you met my expectation in terms of percentages for the day. So like, nice job. And I'm like, when did I do that? He was like, oh, like 3 or 4 sets ago. I'm like, God bless, like why could, like, it would just be one of those situations. So like, at least we had kind of a better idea, and it's like he got better in that sense and stuff like that. And the big, you knew it was starting to get serious when they started writing workouts on the board. Because that was huge, because that was like, and that was partially because of Don. When Don came, Don was even like, hey, I need to know what they're doing, kind of a deal. And then Don would start writing the workouts on the board. And so that was when it kind of started to get, that was when it started to get like, or we're like, oh man, he's actually, listening and stuff like that. But those are probably the biggest things that like he started to do, but there was still like, it was the bare minimum, but like you appreciated that he was at least trying and taking feedback. Right. And then for me as a coach, a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, my structure, I have every detail mapped out with my lifters, because I remember how frustrating it was to not know. So like I will I do monthly check-ins with all my lifters, and I will tell them flat out, hey, this is what we're doing for this training block. This is what I see. This is what we're going to progress to. Your next training block is going to have this. This is your big meet you have coming up. And like, I have every detail of their prep mapped out. They know what's coming. They know what's going to happen. I will be giving them updates as we go along. Accessory work. I am a big accessory work person. Like I will program 2 to 3 accessory work exercises after each workout, and it's mapped out and it follows a rhythm. It follows a flow. We have upper emphasis, lower emphasis, a lot of single arm, single leg stuff. These are all things that like I've picked up from a variety of other coaches that I've had the pleasure of working with and talking to and stuff. But those are probably the biggest areas that I have, evolved as a coach from like what I was taught. And then on top of that is just like straight up training blocks. Because like one of the biggest things that annoyed me about Glenn is like we would sometimes do like a 3-week block, sometimes we would do a 4-week block, sometimes it was a 6-week block, and like it would just never. So like I have like my athletes know when their deload week is coming. It's going to come every 4th week. They know that like we're going to do the same variations for those 3 weeks leading up to the deload week, and then it's going to rotate. Like they know all of this is coming, and it's just one of those situations where we're going to continue to focus on these things and build these things and rotate the exercises and touch all the bases and stuff like that. They know what to expect when we're getting ready for a competition, so they can start to mentally prepare themselves. Like there are no surprises. And I think the other thing too that I took away from Glenn that I incorporate with my athletes is I will not ask my athletes to do something I've either not done myself or I'm not going to test out beforehand. Probably one of my biggest, outside of the whole like coach athlete thing that we talked about, another one of my biggest pet peeves is coaches who've never competed. Like when the first gym space that I had a coach, and that was why I trusted Glenn so much. Like Glenn was like an 800-pound deadlifter. He was a 700-pound squatter. I'm like, why would I not listen to this dude on how to get strong? Right. And he did it naturally too. So it's just like, yeah, like, I mean, his autism was a superpower, but like, I just, like, he knew how to get strong. And like, I'm like, why would I not listen to the dude? He has walked the walk I am trying to do. Like I'm trying to do myself. So I think that's what gives me a lot of credibility with my lifters is I've been there. I can understand, I can relate to what they're going through. I can help them kind of bridge the gap from where they are versus where they want to be. And I know a lot of coaches that are going to get butthurt by this, but like if you have not competed ever, or like if you just like trained in your gym for, whatever, and then decided you were going to coach, like how do you expect athletes to trust you? How do you expect athletes to like fully, buy into what you're saying and stuff like that? Like there was a local coach in Illinois for the longest time that like drove me nuts because he would just talk about things, and like he would talk about experiences that he had as a coach. And I'm like, and like one of the things was like he would coach athletes down at the Pan Am Games. And like if the air conditioning went out or whatever, he was just like, well, you're just going to have to get used to it like we had to in, whatever location or whatever. And it was just like, motherfucker, you weren't doing the lifting. I was like, have you ever had to train in this stuff? Like you were just standing there in a jumpsuit yelling cues at people. Like it just, that kind of coaching just drives me nuts. That whole like, well, this is what it takes to be the best. It's like, yeah, well, some of these people literally are just trying to get a good workout in before they go home to take care of their kids and their significant other for the day. Like, so yeah, I just, coaches that have like zero buy-in, and whether, and like, cause when I first had my gym, I had a business partner. He would ask, he's like, how come you won't let me coach the weightlifters? I was like, cause you've never competed. And he's like, well, I just don't know if it's for me or whatever. I said, all right, I'll tell you what. I said, I will write you an 8-week training block. I said, I need you to finish this training block, and then I will let you coach the weightlifters. And he got like 3 weeks into it and he stopped. And I'm like, well, I said, like, he's like, I have my level 1. I was like, yeah, I was like, I teach those. Like, I know the kinds of people that take them. I was like, that does not qualify you to coach. So it's just, for me personally, it's just like having that buy-in and stuff like that. And that was something that Glenn taught me. Like Glenn was constantly, trying, and Travis Mash, I think that's why Travis Mash and I got along so well, because Travis Mash was like a jack of all trades. Like he was an elite level power lifter. He trained at the Olympic Training Center. He was always trying different things and stuff like that. So he and I would just sit there after training during the muscle driver days and just talk shop about, West Side and all these different things. And we would just talk about some of the cool stuff that we've seen in the strength world. And I think that just helps a ton as a coach, is like having that pedigree, having that, like, I've done these things, so I know what you're dealing with. And then that'll get that additional buy-in, especially because, like, how it is. Like, there are just going to be days where athletes are going to be like, yeah, this isn't working. I don't think you know what you're doing. And if you can pull from those experiences and say, like, yes, during this time I had this happen, this is a very similar situation, this is how I dealt with it, or this is what ended up happening, and this is how it was worked through, and this is what I know I could do to help you, it's just going to help ease that anxiety and help bridge that gap from, again, where they are to where they want to go.
100%. One thing out of there that I think is interesting with Glenn, especially, was just I think a lot of people don't understand how strong
Oh
that
my
dude
God.
was. Like he told me a story one time that he did a 500-pound good morning
Yes.
for a set of
Yes,
five.
there was this when we were in Cal Strength, there was this gym in Pleasanton that he would go to. And I went with him one time because like it was the weekend I went out there to visit. And he went into this like little gym and like so this is how you know how that's how the Penlay row came about, right? So like it was literally like
Mhm.
he was doing bent over rows in a gym and he didn't have chalk and he didn't have his straps. So he couldn't hold onto the barbell for the entire set. So he was just setting it down between each rep. Somebody saw it, knew him, and they just started calling it Penlay rows. Like he didn't like be like, oh, I just invented this new lift. He literally just was like losing his grip on a barbell because he was doing rows with 400 pounds. He was doing Penlay rows for like sets of 5 to 8 with like 445. And he couldn't hold on to it. He couldn't hold on
Dude,
to it for a full set, so he was just like setting it on the ground.
oh my God. I
Yeah.
mean, that man was so strong, dude. He was unbelievable. And he would
Yeah,
always
100%.
downplay it too. He like hated whenever we asked him about
Yeah.
his like lifts or anything like that. He hated talking about it. But I'm like, dude, he told us another one that blew my mind was he did a seated strict shoulder press with
I
182
don't
kilos, he
I don't
said,
I mean
400
I don't
pounds.
doubt that at all.
Um I mean, just ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So we'll go into. I want to get
Yeah.
into maybe last question here. You mentioned that you are a USA
Yes.
weightlifting course instructor and kind of a mentor in
I
the
try to
coaching
be.
space
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. I'm curious to know, like, you're on the ground teaching new coaches all the time. What's something that you've learned from teaching coaches?
It was I wouldn't say it was necessarily something that I learned, but it was something that I reinforced. And it was something that I want to say Travis told me when I was getting into coaching and stuff like that. Because, oh no, it was Don. I'm sorry. Don told me this. Because how I got into coaching was literally like one day I was hanging out at the house in California and Glenn woke me up and he was just like, hey, I got to go teach this course at Cal Strength. I need your help. Donnie was supposed to help me, but he can't make it. Can you come help? I was like, yeah, sure. Ended up being a USA, I can't remember if it was a Penlay or a USAW level one. So I started helping him teach those. Then we got to Muscle Driver, and he would ask me, Travis, to come help and teach those courses and stuff like that. So we would go and we would help him and things like that. And that was kind of how I got into coaching because I had people who would be at those events being like, hey, would you be willing to write me some programming? And I was like, yeah. And so that's literally how my business got started. Was I started helping out of these courses. A couple athletes liked how I was teaching things, and they asked me to continue to coach them and stuff. And so the first time people at Muscle Driver realized I was coaching a large group of people, Don like kind of pulled me aside and was just like, hey, like he goes, I'm gonna tell you right now. He goes, this is not for the faint of heart. He goes, it's not easy. He goes, but my biggest piece of advice to you is the minute you think you've got it all figured out, you need to go find a new job. And I kind of was just like, yeah, that makes sense. Like I 100% get that. And as like I went through the years and stuff like that, I kind of always kept it in mind. And that was always like, I was like, the minute I don't want to do something, or I feel I'm like, I'm dreading it, like I'm done kind of a deal. But teaching these courses has really ingrained that in me. Like I am constantly learning something about either myself or coaching. Like there's a way I do a jerk warm up with athletes now that I literally got from somebody at the coaching course because before Anna Swisher came and redid all of the coaching stuff, I think she did that in like 2019, 2020, something, 21 or somewhere around that range. Before that, like some of the coaching materials left something to be desired, in particular when it came to jerk footwork. And so I would just struggle in terms of teaching the footwork because I'm like, this is how I was taught, but I just don't know if it's right or whatever. And then when we were doing like there's a portion where you do the U teach, where the athletes essentially have to teach other like the people in their group what you just taught them. And I heard and I had up until this point I had always said like I want you to freestyle the jerk work. If you think you've got something that works, try it out and let's see. That's where we learn. You figure out what works and what doesn't. And I heard a person teaching the jerk footwork in a way that I was like, holy shit, like that makes sense to me. And I stole it. And I told him I was going to steal it. I said, I'm using that forever. And so like little situations like that, whether it's how somebody explains something, how somebody understands something, or like how I am trying to get information across, like this last course that I taught, definitely was a little bit more of a frustrating one for me because I had a lot of new people in the course, more so than normal, that had never done a snatch or a clean before. And so like I felt like I was failing the entire course because I'm like, man, I'm like, we are like behind. We went over every day, and that's just not me. I'm a very like on schedule, like whatever. But like I felt like there was just things that we needed to go over and they needed to do in order to, you know, make sure that they understood this, because I couldn't have them leaving not thinking, or thinking that like I taught them like bad form or like a shitty way of doing something. And so it was like after the fact, one of my athletes who's been assisting me, Jess, I just sat down with her and I was like, how can we do this better? And she was like, what if we did, you know, X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, that's a great idea. We're going to do that moving forward. So I didn't necessarily learn anything new through teaching these courses, but it validated and vindicated and drove home that piece of advice Don got me, you know, when I first started coaching back like in 2013 or 12 or whenever it was, that was like, the minute you think you've got it all figured out is the minute you need to go do something else, because you're not doing anybody any good. And I keep that to heart, and I keep it even more so now. Like the older I get, the further I get into this, like I am constantly trying to learn. Like I collaborate with my athletes a lot more, especially my higher end, like masters lifters that are doing worlds and doing all this stuff. Like I give them a say, saying like, hey, what are some things you like to do in training? What are some things you absolutely are like, I don't get anything out of this, I'd rather not do those things. Like I'm just constantly trying to learn and improve not only myself as a coach, but as a communicator, as a moderator, and then like, you know, in terms of an implementer as well, as all these different things.
If I had to say one thing that we constantly hear from our guests is
Yeah.
is that in particular, is that every single one of the best performing coaches all seem to say the same thing when we talk about this. So they say that you
Yeah.
always have to be learning, like, and that like you have to go out of
Yeah.
your way to make sure it happens, right? And sometimes that just means that you're making sure to be making sure to recognize when you're using the same
Yeah.
cues and they're not working anymore, and you got to
Yeah.
get out of your current toolbox, or when you're using the same programming approach and it's just like the progress just
Right.
isn't quite working as well with this one athlete, and you got to switch it up, or as simple as like relearning the same lessons that you thought
Yeah.
you understood years ago. Like I think a lot of the time
Yeah.
that's a big one, is people will learn a lesson and then lose it a
Oh,
little
100.
bit, have
Like
to be
those
reinforced on that
journals that
lesson
I told you about that I have, like I go back and I read them every once in a while just to see if I get any like refresh of ideas. Like there was a way, like the snakes and ladders that was mentioned in the Penlay method book. I forgot about that. And then I read it in
Hmm.
the book, and then I went back and found my journal, and I found like when we did the snakes and ladders, and I was like, shit, like that's part of my meet prep with my lifters. Like we do that all the time, like getting ready for a competition and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's just it's crazy. And like the other thing too, that I think I get a lot of coaches that tell me I shouldn't do this, but I don't understand why. I want my athletes to work with other coaches. And the way I equate it, because I'm a teacher as well, so like because I'll have kids that like will not listen to their parents, but if I tell them to do the same thing, they're like, oh yeah, that's great, I'm going to do that. I equate it to like the cool aunt or cool uncle syndrome. Like mom and dad can tell you to do something till they're blue in the face, but the minute like your aunt or uncle who you absolutely adore says to do the exact same thing, they're like, did you hear what Aunt Sissy told me? Like I'm going to start doing that. And your mom and dad are like, yeah, no shit, like I like whatever. So like I actually encourage my lifters to go to other coaches seminars. Like I have athletes who will do Greg Everett seminars. I have a lifter who works with Cheryl Hayworth on the side of also working with me. Like I encourage my athletes to work with other coaches, because I could be saying something till I'm blue in the face and they could just say it this exact same thing just in a way that makes better sense. And then I will say, what about what they were doing made sense to you? And then we'll collaborate through that way and stuff like that. So yeah, like that's the whole other side to that. But like I said, when I tell certain coaches that, they're like, wait, aren't you worried that that coach is going to try to poach your athlete? And it's kind of like the whole, like, you know, dating somebody, right? Like if somebody's able to sneak in there and take your significant other away in one way or another, like they weren't really yours to begin with. Like you did something that caused that. So I just try to be as open of a book as possible, and just be as open and be as collaborative and be as like receptive to things as I possibly can, and then just be willing to work with other coaches, other, ways of doing things, and then admit, like, I think probably the biggest like strength you can have as a coach is to say, I don't have an answer for you, but I'm going to find one, or I'm going to figure out where I can get that answer, and I'm going to get back to you.
100%, 100%, dude. That's great. Let's go ahead and get into the last segment here. Our take a question, leave a question. So for anybody who doesn't know, we've been doing a segment recently where we'll have guests take a question from our previous guest and leave a question for our next guest. So your question comes from Matt Sicchio, the CEO of USA Weightlifting, who asks, how has the community of weightlifting impacted your journey, not just in weightlifting, but life?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is why he was smirking at me Friday when he came into the gym. He trains at Pinnacle Weightlifting, where one of my other jobs, I work in the gym with Jackie Black, and he came in, he's like, "Hey Tom, how's it going?" It was a different interaction than we normally have. So I have a feeling this is why that came about. I love Matt. I mean, honestly, I tell people this all the day. Like, I am beyond grateful, humbled, fortunate for weightlifting as a whole. Like, I would not have what I have right now without it. I would not have the experiences. I have some of my best friends. Sean Rigsby is probably one of my, like, Sean Rigsby and Taylor Harris are probably two of my closest friends in the sport. Jim White is another coach that I collaborate and talk to all the time and stuff like that. Like, I have some of like my best like partnerships and relationships with people, through this sport that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like, I always wanted to be a coach. I wanted to train people. I wanted to work with people and stuff like that. But once Glenn got his claws into me and exposed me to the world of weightlifting, I feel like it afforded me so many different opportunities. Like, I don't think I would have been as successful of an athlete in all the other sports that I was without Glenn and without weightlifting. Like, just snatching and clean and jerking, and it made me the strongest, most powerful version of myself. Like, and it translated over to so many different things, to Moss wrestling, to the Highland Games, to the strongman, and just like, grid and all this other stuff. Like, without that experience that I had and Glenn giving me that phone call in like 2010, I would not have any of the stuff that I have now. So I am forever grateful to the sport of weightlifting. And I tell this at the end of all my USAW courses. When I was living with Glenn, when I was living with Glenn, I tried, Jesus, why is this hard? Sorry. I tried writing him a rent check 3 times. I was sleeping on his couch. He let me stay with him. I was with him in California for like 3-4 months. I tried writing him a rent check 3 different times. And because he wouldn't answer me in terms of what I owed him and stuff like that. So I just was like, you know what, if you're not going to, I'm just going to give it to you. And I wrote the check. I handed it to him. And every time he would get really pissed at me, he'd grab the check out of my hand, rip it up in my face. And he'd be like, I do not want your damn money. He's like, what I want is, he goes, is the next time you have an opportunity to pay it forward to somebody, somewhere, something, you do it. And so I feel like I am now, because of that, and because of that generosity and that hospitality, that he didn't know me from a hole in the wall. He had no business being as nice to me as he did. I feel like I am now on this like lifelong journey to do the same thing when it comes to weightlifting. Like the coaching courses, I answer every email and text message that I get. People ask me all the time, hey, how would you handle this situation? I don't know you from a hole in the wall, but I'm going to help you because you reached out. Same thing with my lifters. Like, I want, like, my lifters that want to coach, I will sit down with my lifters and be like, hey, this is what I would suggest. Like, I would try this. I would try this. Like, I want, like you're talking about, like, I want to be that resource because, like I said, Glenn and Don, and I'd even throw Travis in there. Like, they had no business being as nice to me and as open and as warm and as welcoming. Like, I was a pain in the ass when I was younger, and I still am to an extent, but like, they had no business being as nice and as helpful as they did. So like, it's the very least I can do, especially now that they're gone, is like just continue on that legacy and that kindness and that generosity that they extended to me, and just keep extending it, passing forward to other people. So because of weightlifting, like, I wouldn't have any of that going on in my life. I wouldn't have that sense of purpose.
Dude, I have chills. I'm like, genuinely actually have chills here. Man,
Wow.
Great answer. So, man, that's awesome. we're gonna have you leave a question
Yes.
for our next guest. Now I'm gonna set this up as if we have our guest booked, and then we'll edit it in post if we need to. So we either we don't have our next guest booked, so I want to know what question you have for our next guest, and then let me go ahead and do another line here. Our next guest is Sean Rigsby, who you mentioned as a partner and a friend. What question do you want to leave for him?
I think a big thing that I would love to know is the differentiation that these people in the sport have between, I feel like there are three groups of individuals, and I would just love to know their take on the individuals and the positives and the negatives and such like that. And so like the first group is our athletes, right? Like what are the trials and tribulations of being an athlete? What are the positives of being an athlete? Then you have like the athlete coach, right? Like you have the people who are kind of part-time in it both ways. Like what are the trials and tribulations that those individuals have to deal with? What are the positives that they get to deal with? What are the benefits that they're dealing with? And then you just have the coach. Like what are the trials and tribulations of the coach and stuff like that in terms of what are the positives and what are the benefits and stuff like that. So I would really love to know like what their mindset or their viewpoint is on those three groups of individuals, because I feel like those are the three big groups that we do deal with in the sport these days, especially with the age of social media. You're talking about the live streaming, the podcasting, all the different things that the different plates that these people have to handle. Like how do you see those fitting in with those three groups of individuals?
Dude, awesome question. If you guys want to hear the answer to that, make sure to check out our next episode. Tom, thank you so much for doing
absolutely.
this.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's a great way to start off my Sunday.
For sure. And where can people find out more about what
my personal bio or my personal page is on Instagram. It's at Strength Coach Sroka, at Strength_Coach_Sroka, Sroka. My business is at The Strength Agenda. Me and my partner John Ziegler have been doing a lot of cool stuff. We have our own app. We've launched a couple of different ebooks. We're launching a bunch of different services in terms of like business mentoring, coaching, stuff like that, on top of like the working with the different athletes and putting out different programs and such. The Strength Agenda is where you can see things all about my athletes. You are not going to see me except for my talking head on the Strength Agenda page, because it is about the business and it is about highlighting my athletes and the cool things they accomplish. And then our website, www.thestrengthagenda.com. That's where you can find all the information and things along those lines. So like I appreciate you guys giving me the time. I appreciate anybody that reaches out, asks questions. I am always more than happy to answer them and help in any way that I can.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to link all that stuff in the description below as well, so people can find that. For sure. And Calvin, where can people find you?
At Calvin Lackey, 81kg on everything.
And you guys can find me at Big Bend Strength on everything. We'll catch you guys next week. Bye.
Bye. If you found this video helpful, then make sure to check out this video here, or this episode of the Last Set, Best Set podcast.